Some stories start with a handshake. This one starts with a dismissal. When a black woman walks into one of the most powerful corporate buildings in Chicago, she's told to leave. No questions asked. But what the receptionist didn't know was that the woman she just insulted wasn't here for an interview, a delivery, or a favor. She was here to take over. What happens next will shake the very foundation of the company and change everything they thought they controlled. This is not just a story about power. It's a story about justice, legacy, and truth. If this story inspired you, make sure to hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe for more gripping, real-world narratives that challenge, uplift, and awaken. Drop a comment below and let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear your thoughts. The morning sun painted the glass towers of downtown Chicago gold as the city stirred to life. Among the waves of pressed suits and quickened footsteps, a sleek black Tesla pulled into the private parking deck of a corporate giant, Hollinger and Company. The woman behind the wheel was calm, composed, and dressed in a tailored navy pantsuit that whispered power without screaming for attention. Her name was Naomi Ellison, and she wasn't here for an interview. She stepped out, the soft click of her heels echoing in the garage. Naomi wasn't the kind of person who liked grand entrances. Her power lived in precision, not performance. Still, there was something magnetic about her presence. The building, despite its concrete and steel, seemed to shift when she walked in. Inside the lobby, the receptionist, a young blonde woman with a rehearsed smile and a fresh coat of gloss, was busy scrolling on her phone. She didn't look up as Naomi approached. Naomi cleared her throat gently. "Good morning. I'm here to see the board." The receptionist finally glanced up, her smile flickering for a moment before she caught herself. Her eyes skimmed Naomi's deep brown skin, natural curls pinned neatly, and the lack of a name badge. Her tone shifted. "Interviews are on the second floor," she said flatly, nodding toward the elevators without asking Naomi's name. "I'm not here for an interview," Naomi replied, her voice steady. "Just let them know Naomi Ellison is here." The receptionist's expression tightened. "Look," she said, waving her manicured hand dismissively. "I don't know what game you're playing, but I don't have time for walk-ins today. You can't just stroll in off the street and demand to see the board. Now please, get lost before I call security." Naomi stood still. Her face revealed nothing. For a second, the lobby felt colder. She offered the woman a small, disarming smile. "You're making a mistake." "Right." The receptionist scoffed, already turning back to her phone. Naomi didn't argue. She turned, walked past the front desk, and calmly pressed the elevator button. She didn't need the receptionist's permission. On the 38th floor, the real boardroom was alive with anxious chatter. Hollinger and Company, a legacy tech firm with a tangled history of power, wealth, and questionable ethics, was on the edge of something big, or so they thought. Inside the boardroom sat 12 men and 2 women, all white, all in their 50s or older, dressed in the usual Wall Street uniform. They were whispering about a potential acquisition, unaware of the storm brewing. At precisely 9 a.m., the double glass doors opened. Naomi walked in. The room fell silent. Several of the men squinted. One of them, Gerald Royce, the interim CEO, stood up, confusion clouding his face. "Can we help you?" Naomi placed a leather folder on the table and opened it with practiced grace. "I believe you can," she said, sliding the documents across. "Effective today, I'm the new majority shareholder of Hollinger and Company. I now own 52.6% of your voting rights." No one spoke. Gerald's face drained of color. "This is a joke," one of the board members muttered. "This has to be a joke." Naomi pulled out her phone and connected it to the boardroom screen. "This," she said, "is not a joke." A series of charts, legal filings, and purchase agreements flashed across the screen. Names of shell companies, acquisitions, and share transfers filled the room like an avalanche. They had been played slowly, carefully, and legally, and no one had seen it coming. "I've been buying your silence for months," Naomi said calmly, "through subsidiaries, international firms, and insider offerings. None of you asked the right questions. Too busy counting your quarterly bonuses." The silence was thick now. "I'm here to clean up this mess," she continued. "You've been bleeding talent, exploiting workers, and covering up ethics violations for years. That ends today. Gerald tried to laugh, but it came out broken. Who the hell do you think you are? Naomi's gaze didn't flinch. I'm the woman your receptionist just told to get lost. The door creaked open again. This time, 2 legal advisors, a tech analyst, and her chief of staff entered. Each took a seat beside Naomi like pieces locking into place. I suggest you read the new leadership charter before your lawyers do, Naomi added. There are immediate changes. Some of you will resign. Others will submit to audit review. If you resist, your reputations and pensions go down with the company. But this company is our legacy, one of the women cried. No, Naomi said. It was your legacy. Now it's mine. Downstairs, the receptionist, still oblivious, was laughing with a co-worker about that lady who thought she could just walk in here. Her laughter faded when the company's internal communications blasted an emergency board alert. Moments later, her phone buzzed. One word from HR. Terminated. Outside, the sky had turned gray. The winds had shifted. The building that once stood like an untouchable titan was now trembling under new leadership. And Naomi, standing by the boardroom window, watched it all unfold. Quietly, confidently ready. She hadn't come to play. She came to reclaim. Naomi Ellison stood at the center of what had once been a fortress of unshakable privilege. By noon, the news had leaked. A mysterious black businesswoman had taken over Hollinger and Company in a quiet coup. The headlines missed the real story. This wasn't about revenge. It was legacy. And hers didn't start in a boardroom. It started with her mother, Lorraine Ellison, 40 years earlier, in a cramped apartment in Englewood, South Side Chicago. Lorraine had grown up hard. Her mother cleaned houses, and her father disappeared before she turned 6. But Lorraine had fire in her spirit and iron in her spine. By 16, she worked 2 jobs, nights at a diner, weekends at a garment factory. Education was her dream, but life had other plans. She met Marcus, a sharp-tongued, ambitious man with big ideas and no patience for failure. They had Naomi young, too young, but Lorraine raised her daughter with quiet resilience. When Marcus left, Lorraine didn't fold. She adjusted. By day, she worked in the mailroom of a corporate firm in downtown Chicago, the same firm that would, decades later, become part of the Hollinger empire. At night, she studied business, economics, data processing, anything to rise, but promotions never came. No matter how hard she worked, how clean her record, how many extra shifts she pulled, the answer was always the same. You're not quite the right fit, Lorraine. Still, she stayed. She endured their microaggressions, their backhanded compliments. The men called her sweetheart and asked her to bring coffee. The women clutched their purses in elevators. No one learned her name, but Lorraine listened. She absorbed every hallway conversation, memorized every internal policy. Over time, she became the shadow architect of machines she couldn't enter, until one day, everything cracked. It was 1993. A mistake in payroll sent thousands in bonuses to upper executives and nothing to the floor workers. Lorraine spotted it before the systems team did. She flagged it, quietly, thought they'd be grateful. Instead, HR called her in, accused her of snooping into privileged systems. She was escorted out by security, fired. She never worked corporate again, but she didn't give up. She pivoted, opened a small bookkeeping business from home, took local clients, grew it with the same discipline that once fueled her nights of mail sorting and quiet dreaming. And she raised Naomi with the lessons no school could teach. When the door doesn't open for you, she told her daughter once, you build your own house, and you decide who gets the key. Naomi listened the way Lorraine had listened, and she watched, too. Watched her mother struggle, but never bend. Watched the same company that discarded Lorraine rise into a billion-dollar behemoth. She remembered its name, and she remembered the names of the men who signed the letter that fired her mother. Decades later, Naomi graduated top of her class in finance, got her MBA from Wharton, and built her first fintech company from her college dorm. She sold it for $12 million at 26. then built another, then another. Every move she made, she tracked Hollinger's rise, its mergers, its acquisitions, its vulnerabilities. But back then, she didn't reveal her intentions. She played their game, invested through silent partners, dressed down for meetings, smiled when they underestimated her, took notes every time they talked over her. She studied them like her mother once studied floor plans. Until the day came when the stars aligned. A recession, a public scandal involving a bribery case in one of Hollinger's overseas branches. Board members began cashing out their shares quietly, desperate to protect their other interests. Naomi pounced. With funding through international backers she'd mentored, she orchestrated a multi-phase acquisition plan. It took nearly 2 years, but the end was surgical. And now, back in the present, on the 38th floor, the real work was beginning. She launched a full audit, internal and external. Overnight, departments were put under review. The culture of fear and favoritism began to rot under scrutiny. People whispered in the halls. Managers scrambled. Old alliances shattered. But not everyone resisted. Down in engineering, Luis Moreno, a young Latings developer, stayed late to show Naomi a predictive analytics tool he'd built on weekends, but had never been allowed to present. She promoted him immediately. In HR, Fatima Basri, a hijabi woman who had once been passed over for director roles 3 times, was named head of people and culture. Naomi wasn't just replacing the old guard. She was redistributing power, not out of pity, out of principle. But the deeper she dug, the darker it got. In a forgotten hard drive recovered from an abandoned apartment server, Naomi's forensic tech team found a series of encrypted folders. When cracked, they revealed whistleblower complaints, dozens, never filed through official channels, allegations of racial bias, gender discrimination, even settlement records, quietly sealed. Naomi called a meeting, not with the board, with the janitorial staff, the mailroom workers, the assistants. She didn't sit at the head of the table. She sat in the circle. "I need to hear the truth," she said. "Not what's on the surface, what's underneath, what they've kept buried." And they spoke. Some cried, some raged, some couldn't even find the words. But Naomi listened, just like Lorraine had taught her. And as she listened, she took notes, not just on people, but on patterns. She began drafting a blueprint for a new structure. One built on transparency, equity, and merit, not nepotism and exploitation. But power doesn't die quietly. In the shadows, former executives gathered, angry and humiliated. They began leaking documents to the press. Anonymous emails hinted at Naomi's hostile takeover, her radicalism. They hoped to smear her, break her image before she could solidify control. She expected it. She was ready. But what she didn't expect was what she found buried deepest in the audit. A connection, a trail of financial manipulation going back over 20 years, to the very firing of her mother. Names she remembered, signatures. Her mother hadn't been fired for breaking rules. She'd been scapegoated because she'd uncovered fraud that, if exposed, could have destroyed the company back then. But they buried her instead. Now, Naomi had the evidence and a decision to make. Naomi sat in her private office on the 39th floor, an office no one had used in years. It was once reserved for founders, a sacred space locked after the last patriarch passed. She had it open not out of pride, but purpose. Before her sat a single printed document, an internal memo from 1993, buried under digital silence for decades. It detailed how Lorraine Ellison had flagged a $1 million discrepancy in Hollinger's pension fund, the same pension fund now riddled with offshore accounts and falsified balances. At the bottom, 3 signatures. One of them belonged to James A. Royce, Gerald's father. Naomi leaned back, a storm dancing behind her steady eyes. The truth wasn't just scandal. It was generational theft. They'd taken from her mother to protect themselves. Now they were about to feel what it meant to answer for their sins. She summoned her team, legal, PR, compliance, and her newest addition, Luis, now director of innovation. "I need this verified and cross-checked," she told them, sliding the memo across. "Everything, Every signature, every transaction. Quietly. And get me a media strategy. I'm not hiding this. Within 48 hours, the truth unraveled like a pulled thread in an expensive suit. Shell companies traced to former board members. Pension funds drained, rerouted, then written off. And Lorraine's name listed in a back-channel email. If we let this woman talk, we're done. Naomi didn't cry. Not now. The time for tears had passed. She called her mother that evening, her voice softer than the power she wielded. "Mom," she said, "you were right." Lorraine didn't ask for proof. She didn't need it. Her silence on the line said more than any words. The next morning, Naomi made the call. A press conference. The entire company was on edge. Rumors surged through departments. Security was doubled. Former execs, now on the outside, began panicking. They'd assumed Naomi would settle, that she wanted a seat at the table. They never imagined she would flip the entire table over. At 10 a.m., cameras flashed in the grand atrium. Employees lined the railings of every floor. The press, waiting to see what the mysterious new CEO had to say, leaned forward as Naomi approached the podium. She didn't clear her throat, didn't adjust the mic. She just spoke. "This company was built on lies," she began. "And the truth starts today." She laid it bare. The fraud, the manipulation, the exploitation of workers like her mother. She revealed the memo, the pensions, the settlements. And then she named the names. Not out of vengeance, but accountability. Gasps echoed through the atrium. Reporters scrambled to type. The media frenzy began before she even left the stage. Within hours, subpoenas were issued. The DOJ launched an investigation. The SEC followed. Former board members went into hiding. Stockholders panicked. But Naomi? She remained steady. Her plan wasn't destruction. It was redemption. She announced the establishment of the Lorraine Fund, a $50 million endowment for employees wrongfully terminated, harassed, or exploited in the workplace. Funded not by taxpayers, but directly from seized assets reclaimed through internal investigation. She restructured Hollinger and Company into a public benefit corporation, legally bound to uphold ethics, sustainability, and human dignity. She didn't fire people en masse. She invited them to choose, reform or resign. Most of the old guard fled, but the ones who stayed, the ones who'd been silenced, sidelined, overlooked, they rose. One of them was Monica Wu, an ex-accountant who had once been told she was too introverted for leadership. Naomi made her CFO. Another was Marcus Bell, a former mailroom clerk, now head of internal logistics. In every department, Naomi rebalanced the scales. She didn't just promote people who looked like her. She promoted those who had earned it and been denied. But not everyone was ready to embrace the change. In a boardroom ambush, Gerald Royce, desperate and cornered, returned with a private equity group, attempting to buy back control of the company. He came flanked by lawyers, armed with contracts, and convinced he could bully Naomi into surrender. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't call security. She invited him to sit, then slid across a portfolio of evidence, the same documents that connected his father to the pension fraud. Gerald's face turned ghostly. "You inherited a lie," Naomi said. "Now you have a chance to do one thing your father never did. Take responsibility." He never returned after that meeting. Instead, Naomi received an anonymous tip the next morning. A full confession, handwritten, delivered by courier. Gerald's attempt at redemption. It wasn't enough to erase the past, but it was a start. And with that, Naomi made her final move. She dissolved the original Hollinger and Company charter, rebranded the company as Ellison Global. Same assets, new mission, a company built not on dominance, but justice. And its new slogan? No doors closed. 6 months later, the industry was transformed. Other corporations followed suit, not because they wanted to, but because their employees demanded it. Whistleblower protections tripled. Diversity quotas were replaced by equity programs with real funding. Labor unions gained traction. CEO bonuses were tied to ethical metrics, not just profits. Naomi didn't stop there. She began touring colleges, sharing her story, not to brag, but to remind the next generation, the system only wins when you stop fighting. One evening, she returned to the same lobby where it all began. The front desk had a new face now, a young black woman with a confident smile and a clipboard in hand. Naomi approached. The receptionist stood and smiled. "Good evening, Miss Ellison. We've been expecting you." Naomi smiled back. This time, no one told her to get lost. She had already arrived. If this story moved you, inspired you, or even made you think twice about the people we often overlook, don't keep it to yourself. Share this story. Talk about it. Let it spark a conversation in your home, school, or workplace. And if you want more real, raw, and powerful storytelling that entertains and enlightens, make sure you follow, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because these are the stories that change minds. And maybe, just maybe, change the world.